Hello world, welcome back to the Breakout Finder videocast / podcast, depending on where you are listening or viewing in the world. I'm Nate Liss. You can find me on Twitter at @AnOutrageJew. And with me tonight, and all nights, from here on forward, I'm sure, until Ryan decides to bail on me for all the wigs. Ryan Lopes, you can find him on Twitter at StillRyan5. What is the good word this evening, Ryan?
Bro, I am, man, it's Tuesday. We tend to record on Tuesdays, and dude, it feels like a Friday. I'm exhausted, bro. I'm recovering from JJ's appearance last week, man. I'm recovering from my Raptors, I guess, winning. I'm recovering from my Lakers then signing Anthony Davis. I'm recovering from 2 new Drake tracks. And my heart is full. My soul is heavy. I'm ready to talk Dynasty rookie ranks. There's a lot going on, man. There's a lot going on.
Good news for the listeners. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, we were going through number 25 to 36. Pretty painful bunch. I mean, there's some names in there you want to know, but in a draft class that's widely considered not one of the best draft classes we've seen in some time, to be in the back third of it, that's some treacherous territory. So today gets a little better. We're in the middle of it. There's some good names mixed in here. There's some interesting names. I mean, this is where the value is, right? These are the names that are on the cusp of second, third round type guys. So there's some good value in here. We're going to break some of those down. But before we do that, to all the people that have been blowing me up for weeks, literally weeks, about when are you going to be on Stitcher? When's the podcast going to be on Stitcher? Well, guess what,
they all sound
folks?
like that. They all have that voice.
They do. That's everybody on Twitter that's not us or Matt Kelly or JJ or anybody I've actually talked to in person. Look, we're officially on Stitcher. We use Anchor for the podcast, and they're supposed to go out and do the distribution and get us everywhere. Look, I don't do it. I don't go and distribute this. Anchor does it. I went and emailed Anchor because I was tired of getting just beat down over free content. Guys, it's a free show. Give us a little room to breathe. So I do my best, bow outlaw, I get the elbows up, make a little space, and I go, you know what? I'm going to shoot an email over to Stitcher.
A strongly worded email.
Yeah, I was not happy, so I let them know. In fact, I got a hold of Anchor. I said, hey, what's going on? Are we supposed to be on Stitcher? Are we not supposed to be on Stitcher? You told me I'm supposed to be everywhere. They go, hey, it looks like nobody sent it in. We're going to go ahead and fire that email for you. And about 10 minutes later, I get an email back from Lauren, air quote Lauren, over at Anchor, and she said, hey, looks like you guys are on Stitcher now. I was like, wow, no big deal. Only took about 10 minutes and 2 emails, and here we are.
Our girl Lauren.
Lauren, man, saving the day. So with that being said, if you like the show, if you like the guests we're bringing on, if you like Ryan coming on here, dropping his ranks that he drops, doing all the legwork while I just sit in the background and drop dirty bombs all over this show, then rate it. Drop a review. We love the reviews. It helps our show grow. This was our biggest show with JJ last week, and a lot of people
had nothing
loved
to do with JJ. Had nothing to do with JJ.
Right. Zero to do with JJ.
Zero to do with JJ.
The big time guy like that comes on, barely moves the needle for the show, barely bumped it. But obviously, I mean, did you get good response with JJ coming on the show?
Brother, the JJ show, it's hard to keep up with someone like JJ, man. I mean, we obviously, we live and die by the show sheets, and we get, we obviously talk all week. We're going back and forth, talking ball, talking this and that, covering topics, whatever the case may be. And dude, JJ comes on, man, and just encyclopedia minds the whole show. And obviously the dude is just giving out gems for the entire hour and a half or whatever it was. So hats off to JJ, man. Obviously a true pros pro, and just like you said, bro, a legend. He is a stud.
He's a total beast, and hard to argue, best knick-knack shelf in the game.
Bro, his backdrop was serious. The whole time I was fixated on the backdrop.
Right. I mean, because you don't know what my backdrop is. All you see is a green screen. You got the wig and the American flag bandana.
Right.
And
it's JJ again. Just comes in, man, flexing the entire show. He's got helmets. He's got footballs. He's got. You can tell he's a big time football guy. He's a big time football guy with that shelf.
JJ wasn't the only one that was flexing this last week. This goes out to a group of people, a fan base, if you will. And I don't want to say who it is quite yet, but did you happen to catch this pro Nikhil Harry tweet that I dropped a couple days ago? Are you aware of this?
You were out in the streets in the middle of Dad's Day, no shirt on, just doing one of those when people get mad, they just kind of, you know what I mean? You were just out there, bro. You had people coming left, right, behind you, up top. You had some company. Well,
before I talk about the means of which I try to dismantle members of this community, let me read this tweet. On June 16th from Russell Wilson Deserves Better. I might amend that name.
Great guy.
Nikhil Harry, air quote, not having a good camp is exactly the type of news that made this 2019 class potentially gross. I'm buying despite people running scared from the separation issue confirmation bias. Ryan, where in there am I saying anything negative about Nikhil Harry?
Bro, I'm still befuddled, baffled, flabbergasted. Fandom is a sickness, man. You come across some fans out there, and you even so much as mention a player on their team. They don't even care about the words that came before that player's name or after that player's name, and it's gloves are off, bro. And people are upset, and people are gonna let you know about it. People definitely let you know about it. You were getting tackled out there.
I had people tell me I was an idiot. Mm-hmm. I was quote tweeted probably 30 times. Here's a guy right here. He goes, he's a rookie trying to learn the hardest offense in the league, going up against the best corner in the league. We calling dudes busts in June? Shut up. I didn't call anybody a bust. That's your own.
Shut up.
That's your own beat writer. That's your beat writer, who's known, right? And he's known for trolling his own fan base. And people are coming at me. Patriots fans on Father's Day. I had no choice. I literally went arms straight out to the side, balled up fists, and I was just spinning 360s, just trying to beat down this whole community because they were everywhere, crawling on top of each other to get to me. So, oh my gosh, my dog is going ham right now. The point is, Patriots fans, I appreciate you, but I didn't attack Nikhil Harry, man. I was just trying to make a point that I'm buying a dynasty, right? This is the dip that you want if you're looking to buy Nikhil Harry because he's a top 3 guy in this class in dynasty terms. And maybe if you get him at 104, maybe at 105, I don't know if the slip's real, but I love hearing it. But that's not why we're here, Ryan. We're here to talk about your ranks. I just had to get that off my chest. Because Ryan's the only one that's prepared. Ryan does ranks. I just show up and hit record and make some overlays and go home. But Ryan's up late at night grinding. He's got the Matt Patricia pencil over the ear, watching a lot of YouTube videos. And we're going to break down his second group of guys here. We're going 24 to 13. Is that correct, Ryan? Is that how we're doing this tonight?
Rankings, bro. Yeah, I shot you a text, bro. I couldn't hear a thing you were saying before, bro.
Really?
I couldn't hear a thing you were saying.
Did it cut out?
You just cut out, completely cut out, and you just came back.
No way.
We're doing it live, bro. We're doing it live.
What is going on here?
I don't know. You sound beautiful right now.
Okay.
For whatever that's worth. I'm upset because I just missed the entire rant.
I'm gonna assume that worked. I gotta hit stop, and then we'll pick back up, and I'll do some blooper cut in. And we're back. Technical difficulties strike in many different ways, and whether it's Ryan's Wi-Fi, because he's non-line in, which is something I'm going to continue to give him hell about until the day that this is resolved, or it's my mic cutting out. I honestly have no idea. Nobody's really sure what's going on.
The level of production surrounding the show, bro, this is what we're bringing to the people every single week. It's just high class. It's top tier. It's top shelf.
It's mostly chaos.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's mostly chaos.
You're not getting this anywhere else. This is the most banter ever in one of these shows. So, okay, we are officially getting into Ryan's middle of his top 36. This is 24 through 13.
Second tier.
Yeah, second tier. And I just said this, but Ryan apparently couldn't hear any of it, so I'm saying it again. So you're getting this twice. So, Ryan, we probably don't need to go in too heavy on this guy because I feel like we hit him pretty good on the JJ episode. And if you missed it, go to iTunes, go to Stitcher, go to one of these, go find it. The last episode, it's got JJ Zacharyson. I think it's called DJ Moore, American Bombs.
Gems. Oh, yeah, there you go. There's the DJ Moore episode.
Yeah. So go check that out. But we're going to kick it off. Number 24, Devin Singletary of the Buffalo Bills, drafted in the 3rd round, which to some people may have felt early, to some people may have felt late, considering where you had him, kind of pre-combine rank. Tell me about Devin Singletary.
I was surprised when you dropped his name. I mean, obviously you and I talked about almost all these rookies, of course, and I guess I didn't really have a good read as to where you kind of stood on Devin Singletary. So I was surprised when you came out and almost caped for you put the cape on for Devin Singletary. So
I did.
I was a little surprised by that, but keeping it kind of high level here. Again, we covered him pretty thoroughly last week, but I talked about him in one of the pre-draft episodes. But Devin Singletary, you want to have fun watching tape, and Devin Singletary's tape was some of the most fun that I had watching. And then unfortunately the combine came for him, and we kind of know what happened after that. But 86th percentile college dominator rating, and that's kind of the highlight for me. Again, stood out. Just was an absolute workhorse despite being only 5'7", 203 pounds. Just the offense ran through him at Florida Atlantic. As far as his dynasty value, falls on a Bills roster that has LaShawn McCoy, as you touched on last week, that may or may not be on one of his last legs. Frank Gore, who really might play forever, and then guys like TJ Yeldon. So falls in a good situation. Again, trying to keep this one a little bit more brief and high level, but you can definitely see a path opening up for him. But he does have the question marks, which kind of keeps him down towards the bottom of this tier as far as athleticism, as far as size and stuff like that. So definitely, as you said last week, a very intriguing prospect, someone to keep tabs on here.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of good things to say about Devin Singletary. And after the combine, things changed. Before the combine, I think a lot of people were a lot higher on Devin Singletary. And his draft round does support him, though. I mean, the 11th pick of the 3rd round is heavy draft capital for a player. So you got to like that about him, but we've already talked about this quite a bit. But, Buffalo's a tough place to go. There's not really a receiver core there. They got a young quarterback that's inaccurate. You've got 2 older vets in front of him. You got TJ Yeldon. There's a path to touches here. Is it in 2019? Probably not. But Devin Singletary is a guy that I would want to own in the later rounds of a dynasty draft. And I honestly don't think there's much more that you can say about him. I honestly feel like that might have been too much. So let's go to number 23. This is a player that we haven't talked a whole lot about, and this is a guy that I'm excited to draft if I've got a middle round 2nd pick, because I think that's kind of where he's going right now, that early 2nd, mid-2nd. JJ Arcega-Whiteside, 2nd round pick, Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, this is a Matt Kelly favorite. At least he was pre-draft. I think he's probably still a Matt Kelly favorite. Jaws. He was definitely that jump ball kind of red zone target specialist, whatever cliche, whatever word you want to throw at him. 6'2", 225, another 86th percentile college dominator rating, 77th percentile college yards per reception, 74th percentile breakout age. So all these numbers, he's checking all the boxes on player profile. Draws a Kenny Golladay comparison, which I think is super interesting because I mean that wasn't a parallel that I drew pre-draft, but the one that pops up here and makes a ton of sense for me. As far as landing spot in Philadelphia, Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson figure to be kind of 2 of the focal points as far as their wide receivers go, both either 30 or turning 30 or past 30. So aging assets in that regard. We know they have Zach Ertz at tight end still. We know they have Dallas Goedert there at tight end as well. Nelson Aguilar. So Jaws has to kind of find his way, which, much like Devin Singletary, probably not going to see that immediate rookie contribution, but on an offense that just inked Carson Wentz with Doug Peterson calling the shots, an offense that figures to kind of stay consistent, if not continue to kind of rise, revamp the backfield with our guy Miles Sanders. So an offense which figures to be kind of enough to kind of hold and capture and vault someone like Jaws and kind of allow him to do some damage at the next level, kind of like he did all throughout his Stanford career, hurting folks in that red area.
He's one of those guys that we saw him at the pro day, and he put up numbers that we weren't expecting. I think there was an expectation that he was going to test better than people had anticipated, but I think his overall athletic testing was better than some people had expected. I mean, running an adjusted 4.54 was really good for a guy that's 6'2", 225 pounds. And again, he has that draft capital, a second round pick. When you look at this team, the Eagles, they were number 17 in pass protection in 2018. And this is a team that in the first round added an offensive lineman that should shore it up. I mean, one of the more popular names in the draft, in Dillard. And, hopefully the goal here is that we're gonna see Arcega-Whiteside kind of slowly filter into this offense. I think he brings a lot to it, a piece that's been missing. Hopefully he can stay healthy. He was relatively healthy in college. This is a guy that did most of his damage his senior year, especially in Stanford, and played tough competition, which is important, and was a massive player in this offense. I mean, a big focal point of it. So it's somebody you should be excited about, and I feel like he's not getting a lot of buzz. If you've already done your rookie drafts, or if you have rookie drafts coming up, this is a guy that you should be targeting because he's still a value, because there hasn't been a lot of news yet, right? He hasn't really hit that Roto World blurb yet, but you can bet as soon as he does, he's going to vault, because the sky's truly the limit in an offense like this. All right, man. Okay, here's a good one. We did a Breakout Finder graphic about this guy. Super freak athlete. Goes to Baltimore, third round. Myles Boykin, wide receiver. Tell me about Myles.
Yeah, man, Myles, again, the story with him was he didn't quite have the box scores. He didn't have the production during his time at Notre Dame. I think a lot of people were kind of, quick to, attribute that to just, really shoddy, inconsistent quarterback play. Failed to break 1,000 yards, topped out at 872 last year. Failed to break 10 scores, topped out at 8 scores last year. So again, not a player that was necessarily, a big college dominator. Didn't put up the gaudy box score numbers. But as you allude to, speaking of sky's the limit and all that good stuff, there was in a class filled, this 2019 class filled with really good athletes, there was none better than Myles Boykin, man. Dude is an absolute freak of nature. I'm on Player Profiler here, man. 100th percentile catch radius, 90th percentile agility score, 99th percentile burst score, 98th percentile speed score, 94th percentile spark X score altogether, man. So again, just a dude that is literally a mad and creative player, which again keeps his ceiling considerably high. What keeps his rank for me down a bit is just his landing spot. Baltimore, you are banking on Lamar Jackson making that next step as a passer, which I think is possible. I know there's a lot of people drafting Lamar Jackson relatively high this year as far as redrafts, best ball leagues, and all that good stuff. The idea is that he does make that next step, and he does, in turn, completely vault and boost the value of his pass catchers around him. So I might be, a bit lower on Myles Boykin compared to some, given the ceiling, given the athleticism. But again, I'm looking at the entire picture. I am a Lamar Jackson fan, as I believe you are as well. I am a Lamar Jackson believer, but it's kind of one of those things that it was hard for me to really justify, given kind of the questions surrounding that offense in general. But Myles Boykin, man, freaky athlete. If you had him higher, I'm not gonna necessarily go out of my way to argue against it.
You're right. He landed in a landing spot that wasn't good, and that's primarily because the quarterback play last year and Lamar Jackson being more of a run first. I don't want to say run first necessarily, but a guy that's willing to scramble, a dynamic quarterback whose game isn't necessarily just to beat you with his arm. It's to kind of exploit your defensive formation. And if he gets the opportunity to run for yardage, he's going to do it. Last year, a 58% completion percentage, but he only had 170 attempts. So we haven't barely scratched the surface on what Lamar Jackson is, but you said it exactly right. The big bank here is that Lamar Jackson is going to take a step forward, that the passing opportunities are going to be there, that Baltimore is going to trust him to throw the ball despite the fact we saw some deficiencies. There are some big-time quarterback scouts out there, though, that saw a lot of things that they like about Lamar Jackson's mechanics and ability and skill set. They believe that there will be a step forward. And it's not an impossibility, but when you look at a player from college transitioning to the NFL, oftentimes there's not a big leap in completion percentage. And Lamar Jackson going to Baltimore has a good O-line around him. I mean, one of the best in the league in terms of pass blocking. And, they have the run game and Mark Ingram, a seasoned player. And the only guy really in front of Myles Boykin right now is the guy that got drafted before him in Marquise Brown, a guy who's undersized, a speedster. It's going to be interesting to see where he fits in versus Marquise Brown in this offense. Somebody's got to get the targets. The other options here are Willie Snead, Chris Moore. I know Michael Floyd is apparently making an appearance here. There's not a lot in front of him, and he got drafted in the third round, right? This is a clear sign from Baltimore that it's time for us to sort of revamp this offense. We got the quarterback, 2 years ago. We got a new running back, in this offense in Mark Ingram, and they added Justice Hill, another running back that we like, a dynamic running back in this backfield. And then you go and add Boykins, you go and add Brown. You've added the tight ends over the past few years. So you see this offense evolving, and the hope for Boykin is that the opportunity will be there. And I don't think it's crazy if we start seeing him pretty early on here in 2 wide receiver sets, 3 wide receiver sets, if he can pass a guy like Willie Snead. And that's no knock to Snead because he's actually been pretty good his whole career considering where he's come from. But I think the only real competition for him is the guy that got drafted before him. So here's another guy, man. This was honestly to me one of the biggest surprises in terms of draft capital selection. San Francisco has drafted wide receivers in the top 2 rounds in back-to-back classes, I believe. I think that we saw Dante Pettis go in round 2. We saw Deebo Samuel go in round 2. And then this guy goes in round 3, Jalen Hurd to San Francisco. 3rd pick of the 3rd round. Were you surprised at Jalen Hurd going here?
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurd was a player that I went back and forth on a lot. Didn't really like him as a runner at all at Tennessee, despite him kind of showing out his 2015 season, 1,200 yards on the ground, 12 scores. Clearly an athletic player, 89th percentile SparkX score. He was interesting. He was an interesting study on the ground. Obviously found his way at Baylor, made the switch to wide receiver, which was probably the smart move for him. Now in San Francisco, there's so much to unpack here. Again, with the 3rd round capital, I think I heard or saw a blurb or something about the Niners even considering kind of playing him around kind of that tight end spot. So we have a former running back, converted wide receiver, and maybe Kid Shanahan sees him as a tight end. Just that versatility makes him interesting enough as a dynasty asset. 3rd round capital, athleticism, production on the ground was there, production as a receiver. He's didn't quite crack that 1,000-yard mark at Baylor, but again was relatively raw given the position switch. So that's a hats off to him. 946 yards through the air, 4 scores for Baylor in 2018. But the thing for me, again, trying to unpack all this, man, is just, and I'm gonna tag you in here too, man, because I would love to get your thoughts on it. But there's just so many there's so many players in San Francisco, and given Shanahan is addressed as one of the more savvy offensive play callers, so he can realistically utilize all these different pieces. You got a backfield that has legit three runners who can make an impact in Coleman, Breida, and obviously Jerick McKinnon, who they paid a little bit of money to. So you have a loaded backfield. You have George Kittle, who's a pretty decent tight end, soaking up targets as well. And then as far as wide receivers, man, you said it again. Dante Pettis was a relatively high draft pick as well. Deebo Samuel in the same class, relatively high draft pick. Jordan Matthews, Marquise Goodwin. So if you are a Jalen Hurd fan, which I'm not even sure I consider myself a Jalen Hurd fan, but I have him, I guess, relatively high here. But I imagine people might have him a slot or 3 or 4 higher. You have to be somewhat kind of hesitant given all the mouths to feed in San Francisco. I had a really hard time placing Jalen Hurd despite, again, the film and the draft capital and all that. It's hard for me to really see kind of a clear path, even short-term, long-term, whatever the case may be. There's just so many different ways that this thing can kind of get off the rails for him, I think.
And here's the other thing. Do we know that Jimmy Garoppolo is good? Does anybody
stay
know
healthy,
that?
Right? Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy that I'm seeing like widely considered one of the top dynasty quarterbacks in the NFL. This is a guy with 361 career pass attempts amongst 2 different teams. We don't know anything about Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know anything. I mean, the assumption here is that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be this dynamo quarterback that's going to throw all these guys open. There's going to be all these players that are going to be soaking up targets. I mean, when you go and you look at San Francisco and you look at the mouths to feed, I mean, last year, despite injuries, you had George Kittle, who had 136 targets. The next most targeted wide receiver was Kendrick Bourne with 66. I mean, there was a huge discrepancy in targets here. And you had Dante Pettis that was injured, Pierre Garçon gone. I mean, all these players turn up missing. And so it's not a surprise that San Francisco has invested in athletic talent. Jalen Hurd, not necessarily the dynamic player that Deebo Samuel is. Deebo Samuel is the type of player that can play on all levels. He's a special teams guy and a high-end one at that. Jalen Hurd doesn't offer the kick return side of things necessarily, especially at 6'5", 226 pounds. It's not an expectation. But this is a guy that did flash something back in college, especially just like you pointed out, his last year over at Baylor. I mean, he came on, and I'm just not totally sure exactly what to expect out of him, but I thought that the 3rd round pick was just fucking nuts. I don't know I don't know what's going on. He got picked in the 3rd round, and I was just looking around. I was nobody in the room, but I'm like, anybody else see this? What the hell is going on here? You got all these
What are
dudes
they doing
on the
in San
board.
Francisco?
Yeah, what is going on in San Francisco? What are they trying to build? We got a running back group, Tevin Coleman. I don't know if he's good or bad. Matt Breida, I like. Nobody's seen Jerick McKinnon. George Kittle's your best offensive weapon as far as I'm concerned. Dante Pettis was hurt. I don't know anything about your quarterback. Deebo Samuel's a rookie. Jalen Hurd's barely played the position. What the hell's going on? I got Marquise Goodwin who might leave and go to the Olympics and start running again. I don't know what's going on in San Francisco, but there's a lot of mouths to feed. So this is one of those guys that I'm not looking at ahead of an Arcega-Whiteside. I'm not looking at obviously ahead of Deebo by any stretch of it. If there's somebody in your league that's a fan of Jalen Hurd and you select him, I'd probably be selling him because, like you, I mean, I think you have a fair assessment of him here at the 21st overall player in your group. But in this offense, with all these question marks and all these mouths to feed, man, I just honestly don't know. Okay, let's go. Number 20, a QB, finally. To Washington, man, one of the steals of the draft at the 15th pick of the 1st round, Dwayne Haskins.
Yep. Yeah, no, we'll kind of we'll keep this one kind of higher level too. I don't fancy myself a quarterback guru by any means, but again, the story that was written about Dwayne Haskins, man, was just the the sample size coming out. He didn't have a ton of games played, and that kind of gave some film watchers and dynasty fans and draft fans alike kind of a little bit of pause. But in his 2018 season, when he was the starter, 4,800 yards, a little over 4,800 yards and 50 scores, man. So this dude can obviously get it done. Not much on the ground, but my viewings of him, I thought he was kind of that more cerebral passer, a little more calculated. Obviously had a bunch of good weapons to kind of work things out with at Ohio State. One of our favorites in Paris Campbell, Terry McLaurin, had a decent backfield. So again, had the weapons around him, but managed to kind of figure some things out himself and get it done, and has the box score to kind of show for it. So the knock on him is that he's a bit young and he didn't have a bunch of experience. But as far as dynasty value and stuff, I think he was the no-brainer kind of quarterback too in this class. That never really changed for me personally. As far as landing spot, I kind of like Jay Gruden. I don't know. I can't really get a good read as far as what this Washington offense is really going to be. We've managed to harp on Josh Doctson, I think, every single show. I imagine you'll have some very flattering words to share in a few minutes here.
Yes.
But Josh Doctson, again, we just talked about Terry McLaurin as well, who we'll bring back up here in a little bit. Another Nate favorite here in Kelvin Harmon, of course. Backfield is the ever-living, ever-surviving, Adrian Peterson, who's still gonna run the rock. Apparently, is gonna shoot for 2,000 yards. We got Darius Guice coming back. We got Chris Thompson there. So there are some pieces, and there's enough intrigue to kind of keep Dwayne's floor relatively high. But again, I guess with all quarterbacks, and again, especially someone as young as him, and with the games played that he has, it's probably fair to wonder what that transition is going to be like. Is Jay Gruden's job safe? Is Bruce Allen gonna keep Jay Gruden around? There's Washington's probably not the safest, most insulated environment for a young quarterback right now. So those are some of the factors, is why he is where he is, as opposed to closer to the top of the second tier, even the first round for me. But definitely some intriguing pieces. Again, a couple of your favorites, a couple of not your favorites as well. So what's your read on this Washington situation, man?
Well, man, when you look at this on Football Outsiders, they ranked Washington's offensive line and pass protection as number 24, and this is a Washington team that truly did not address the offensive line at all until rounds 4 and 5. I mean, this is a team that selected Bryce Love. They've got Terry McLaurin. They took, was it Montez Sweat? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
They took Dwayne, and of course Dwayne early on. So they didn't really address an offensive line with a young quarterback that's going to step into this role. Obviously, he's going to get the opportunity to play early. It makes me feel like a guy like Jordan Reed is going to be a big value in this offense. I mean, Reed is perpetually injured, but the leader in targets last year, it feels like this could be a great year to buy him in an offense where quarterback could be under fire, especially a non-mobile quarterback, a pocket passer with an offensive line that hasn't been great, that's coming back to health. But man, I don't know what this is. I feel like this is San Francisco all over again. And I know even less about the quarterback now. You touched on it. To me, Josh Doctson is one of the craziest stories. That guy to me is toast. I mean, if you got the deepest benches and you want to add him just for the hell of it, because truly the competition here is scarce. I mean, you got Paul Richardson, who's been hurt a lot. Terry McLaurin, the highest selection they had at wide receiver in this class. I mean, a total stud athlete. Kelvin Harmon, a player that I thought this year would outproduce Hakeem Butler. I know you think I'm crazy for saying it. I'm throwing it out there.
Yeah, what are you doing right now?
No, I know. I'm doubling down on it because people are like, oh, shit, I forgot about that. What an idiot. So he's like calling himself out. Yeah, it's like 8 Mile. I gotta drop on my own disses. So when they pass the mic to you, you're like, what do I do? This is just there's a lot of offensive weapons on this team, but very few of them feel like a definitive the guy, and that's where I feel like Jordan Reed could kind of slip through the cracks a little bit. But we're not supposed to be talking about Jordan Reed. We're supposed to be talking about Dwayne Haskins. So I like some of the guys around him. I don't think there's anybody elite in this offense. I don't know that the offensive line is going to be great, but I think, like you had said, very early on, he was definitively the second best quarterback in this class, and rightfully so. He goes at the spot that you have him. Okay, tight end here, Jace Sternberger, Green Bay in the 3rd round. Why do you have Jace as high as you have him?
Dude, so Jace, coming off the All-American campaign, man, started his collegiate career at Kansas, man, and quickly woke up and realized he was at Kansas and knew that was not gonna work out in his favor. So ended up transferring over to Texas A&M. Managed to put up 832 yards through the air, 10 scores, 17 yards a catch, man. So as far as tight ends go, he again, pretty clear to see why he was an All-American nod. 6'4", 251, 34th percentile Spark X score. So not necessarily the type of athlete that may have shown up on the tape. Kind of did some interesting things after the catch, and so maybe that score was a bit concerning, obviously, and a bit surprising to some folks. But what he lacks for in athleticism, he obviously made up for in pure production. 91st percentile college dominator rating, 93rd percentile college yards per reception, man. So just a monster production wise. Dynasty landing spot and factoring all that in now here. Draft capital, you touched on it. 3rd round goes to play with Aaron Rodgers, which probably isn't a bad thing necessarily for his short term outlook. There are probably more question marks and concerns for his long term stock given Aaron's age and all that. We have, of course, the tight end learning curve. Jimmy Graham still hanging around as far as I know. So there is a way, there is a path for him to kind of be relevant sooner rather than later. I guess the question for me, which kind of buoyed and kind of kept his stock where it was, is just given this offense's kind of long-term projection. What happens if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt again? What happens if Aaron Rodgers walks away in the next few years? That offense obviously changes dramatically. So a lot to like from Sternberger as far as production and kind of his overall profile as a tight end. I think he gets it done, in line as far as receiving, of course. But I guess for me, it's just kind of, long-term question marks that kind of linger.
Man, in terms of the long-term stuff, I mean, he's playing with arguably the best offensive quarterback in the game. I mean, you could throw Andrew Luck in there, you could throw Mahomes in there, but on any given day, Aaron Rodgers is as good as anybody else.
It's pretty good.
But as far as opportunity, it might be a good thing. Look, Jimmy Graham's been on the slide. He's never been a player that's been a rock-solid, healthy player. We've seen injuries throughout his career. We've watched him taper off a bit, as he left New Orleans, which may have been the best fit for him of any team ever. His role has changed. Goes to Seattle, not heavily targeted, not always healthy. Goes to Green Bay, not always healthy. Sees 90 targets last year. But Jimmy Graham is a player that's entering his age 32 season, and Green Bay has a buyout, a potential out in 2020 with him. His final year in Green Bay is 2021. So if the learning curve for the tight end is typically 2 to 3 years, Sternberger's opportunity might come sooner because Jimmy Graham is hurt often. This is a guy that's 32, going on 33. So that's number one. The second thing here is that Green Bay may not stick with Jimmy Graham. There's not necessarily a need to. I know Jimmy Graham is one of the greatest tight ends we've ever seen from an offensive standpoint, but is Jimmy Graham the same Jimmy Graham that we saw in the past? When you look back at Sternberger's college production, big play receiver. I mean, despite, like you said, not top-tier athleticism, but clearly enough to get it done. A guy that's got ample size, that's going to a team with a great quarterback. And if he can build rapport with Aaron Rodgers, and again, you also pointed this out, Aaron Rodgers, not the youngest quarterback in the league anymore at age 35, but there's a few more good years there. If we see Aaron Rodgers play to the age of Drew Brees, Tom Brady, that's 5 more years potentially, and I can see it. Aaron Rodgers hasn't necessarily lost a step. Last year, 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Maybe not as many touchdowns as in the past, but 2 interceptions, still just as accurate and as deadly as he's ever been. So we know Davante Adams is the alpha in this offense. We know that Green Bay didn't really strive to go add anybody to this wide receiver group. They still have Valdez Scantling running out there. Randall Cobb is gone. This run game is a question mark. Aaron Jones should be the number one back here. So there is a path where Sternberger gets an opportunity. Is it going to require Jimmy Graham injury? Probably, but I don't think you're going to have to wait that long for a real potential thing to happen. And who knows who the next quarterback behind Aaron Rodgers is, but I don't know if we're going to see it for quite a while. So I'm buying Sternberger. I'm ignoring the non-top tier athleticism here because the landing spot was good, the opportunity was good, the college production was good, the draft capital was good, and Jimmy Graham has an actual out in 2020. So there's a lot of stars that could align here and give Sternberger a real opportunity to do something great in Green Bay. Okay, I know this is your boy right here. Ooh. You like this guy, and I'm curious whether you like him more than the running back that was selected a year prior, 2 rounds earlier. Damien Harris, running back, New England in the 3rd round. What are we doing here?
Dude, so 18 overall for me, and given the recent news, I wish I ticked Harris up a few more slots, man. Sony Michel kind of came out medically red flagged with that knee, and it's been more the same for him in that camp. Obviously, you and I aren't doctors; we just play one on TV, and this is so we don't know what those medical reports are looking like, man. We don't know what that short term, long term kind of issues might be. But anytime a player has these kind of reoccurring issues that are gonna flare up, and there's obviously some good media reports around it. I am concerned for Sony Michel's short term and long term kind of abilities and the way that he's able to kind of contribute to this offense. Outside of Sony Michel, to answer your question before, as far as talent, man, that's really close, man. Sony Michel was a really solid player as well. Super surprising that Belichick tabbed him as early as he did, but at the same time, as talented as Sony Michel was and as high as I was on Sony Michel, man, I loved Damien Harris from the jump. I never really wavered on him. I know a lot of people kind of had questions about, Josh Jacobs was there. Damien Harris never really truly ran away with it. We know all about Damien Harris, man. Over 7 yards a carry, over back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in that powerhouse Alabama offense, man. So this guy, to me, has always been a really well-rounded, not the most athletic player, but as far as just overall game, pass catching ability, just enough agility, his willingness in pass protection kind of checked all those boxes. Easy to see why he was a Bill Belichick favorite as well. 5'10", 216, so looks like that typical kind of running back. Those are the measurements that we want from a bell cow, or someone that we project as a bell cow. Draws a Damian Williams, another one of my favorite players. A comparison on player profiler. Going back to New England, and as far as the landing spot, another 3rd round selection. We know about Sony Michel and his injuries and his injury history. Rex Burkhead, who I think there was a lot of high hopes for last year, and again he was banged up, and I'm not really sure what the future really holds for him. James White, of course, had a huge season last year. I think that the thought with New England that a lot of these fantasy analysts always come back to is just invest in the cheapest option. This year it could be Damien Harris going forward. The arrow's kind of pointing up for me. If Sony Michel, unfortunately, kind of doesn't get right medically, Rex Burkhead just kind of keeps floundering around. James White's gonna be a factor, but the lane could open up for all 216 pounds of Damien Harris to really kind of lead the way. Maybe Tom Brady doesn't want to start. He's kind of entering that twilight part of his career. He doesn't want to start airing out as much. I know they invested in our guy Harry up top there too, man. But maybe Bill kind of goes high with the wide receiver, but then is running the offense through the ground. This team in general, man, could just throw so many different curveballs at you. But Damien Harris, to your point, I kind of had him, obviously in the middle of this tier. But given the recent news, man, I think a path, you could draw up a story where a path opens up, again, sooner rather than later.
I don't think it's crazy that with a Sony Michel injury, we see Damien Harris step in. Rex Burkhead was pegged to be something greater than he was in his opportunity. I realized he had injuries, but there was a lot of hype around Burkhead coming out of Cincinnati. You know, there was a lot of love for kind of his dynamic playmaking ability. He's a guy who's also 28 years old. He's not the youngest guy. So you pointed it out. This is the New England Patriots. They like to mix it up. They like to show you a lot of different things. I think something that kind of gets lost in translation here is that Cordarrelle Patterson ate up 42 carries last year. That's a guy that stepped out. That's production that needs to be replaced. And is Damien Harris a hedge against Sony Michel? Is it an insurance policy? Here's a question I would throw back to you. Are we saying this because it's a benefit of the doubt because it's the New England Patriots and we think that Belichick is always zigging while the league is zagging and he's smarter than everybody else? So we're saying that Damien Harris was selected by Bill Belichick, the greatest coach of all time, and because there's a correlation and Sony Michel is having these knee issues, that must mean that Sony Michel isn't right. I'm not a doctor. I don't know that Sony Michel isn't right. Sony Michel looked like a stud when he was on the field. And maybe this is insurance because maybe Burkhead doesn't stick around. Cordarrelle Patterson's gone. Maybe James White isn't going to be, as much of a factor in the run game as he was last year, 94 carries. Maybe he just plays more in that receiving game. I mean, he had 123 targets. We lose Rob Gronkowski. We don't know about Josh Gordon. I get the idea that Tom Brady's maybe not throwing the ball as much as he was, but I'm going back to Football Outsiders. Number 1 pass protection in the league is New England last year. And number 3 in run blocking. So altogether, this is a great offensive line with the greatest quarterback in history, the greatest coach in history. So sometimes I feel like we give a lot of benefit of the doubt with a pick like this. But with that being said, if there is an injury to Sony Michel, in my opinion, there's no question that Damien Harris is the guy that's the next man up. Because as you alluded to, people say, oh, how come he didn't run away with the job in Alabama? Well, guess what? Josh Jacobs was taken in the first round. So it's a first-round talent that was playing with him, which answers the question of why part of the workload was being shed to a guy that's this good. I mean, we look at Josh Jacobs. He may not be the most athletic running back in the league, but he is a very, very versatile running back. Can run smooth, can bang between the tackles, clearly can catch the ball. Looks like the type of player that can take over a game when volume is on his side. So it makes sense. But the real thing here is that Damien Harris was always in the mix. He was always in there 130, 150 carries per season in one of the most stacked offenses. The Alabama could have any running back they want in the country. They could have anybody. And they stuck with a guy like this. So when you look at New England, third-round capital, a guy who's just been a staple in the Alabama offense, went to the top rushing offensive line in the league with the best quarterback in the league. It's got a bunch of opportunity, and potentially Sony Michel is injured. I can see why he should be trending up, and I'm with you, man. I think because this is an old list, he's a little low. And I think if you had done it now, he might have bumped up above maybe somebody else here. But that's a guy that I imagine's going towards the late part of the first round at this point, similar to a guy like Darrell Henderson. So there's a lot of reasons to like him too. Here's one though that is a total question mark for me. Didn't do a lot in college. Was not the best receiver on his team in college, was not the first receiver from his team drafted in the NFL draft, did not go to the best landing spot of the 3, but he did go to Washington. Terry McLaurin, third-round pick, the highest selected wide receiver to Washington, which is a cavalcade of just broken bodies, question marks. Don't know what these guys are. We touched on it a little bit, but what's your take on McLaurin?
Yeah, we kind of started to pull back the curtain, and you kind of hit on a couple of those question marks from before. You 100% opened my eyes to, and many others' eyes to Paris Campbell. So totally with you there. There was a good bit of pushback still. Even leading up to the draft and the days before the draft and even on draft day, that Terry McLaurin was the wide receiver to draft and to own from that Ohio State offense. Obviously, the NFL thought a good bit differently of it. So as far as positives for McLaurin, you touched on it earlier when we were talking about Haskins, man. McLaurin is a stud athlete. 95th percentile Spark X score, 95th percentile speed score, which was super apparent on tape. Averaged 20 yards a catch his senior season here. Over 700 yards through the air, 11 scores. So obviously can get it done downfield and lift the lid, as the coaches like to say. Outside of that, production-wise, again, 700 yards isn't gonna necessarily open up eyes or kind of get you really giddy. I kind of revert back to that fit in Washington. That Washington offense in general, as we talked about before, there are a ton of question marks. Not a ton to really hang your hat or hats on. I'm gonna get real kind of narrative with it though, and given the draft capital, he has a rapport with Dwayne Haskins. That's his college quarterback. So I'm thinking, despite the question marks in Washington in general, I'm banking on top tier athleticism, draft capital, and that rapport with Dwayne Haskins, which kind of keeps McLaurin a bit higher on this list. To your point, if I were to do this list, currently, as opposed to a month or whatever ago, I might have had Harris above McLaurin, and obviously a couple other names as well. But I think in general, I was again on one side of the Paris Campbell Terry McLaurin debate myself, but there is enough to like about, I think, from a dynasty perspective, for Terry McLaurin.
I'm not one to bet on injury. I always say it's a terrible idea. You don't want to bank on injury. However, when you're talking about Paul Richardson, you can go ahead and bank on that injury. There's just no chance that Paul Richardson stays on the field to get any of this production done. And when you go to Spotrac and you look at his contract, there's a potential out in 2020. And if he can't stay healthy and some of these other guys on this roster start to pass him up a bit, you can see a scenario where Washington just moves on, maybe with another draft class. I mean, Kelvin Harmon, if he lives up to what people expect him to be, he could be another good option on this team. But Terry McLaurin is clearly the most high draft capital guy in recent years, with the exception of Josh Doxson, who, again, you may as well just Control-Alt-Delete and just get rid of that dude. I'm not even paying attention to him. But Terry McLaurin, if you look at the college production, it's not there. I mean, the yards per reception are there, but Breakout Finder, it takes into account who someone played with. And this is a guy who at Ohio State played with a lot of NFL talent. I mean, this is something that we touch on, and it's being brought up more and more nowadays. But, Mike Weber played there, ate up targets. Obviously, McLaurin, Johnny Dixon, Paris Campbell. There's a lot of players that played at this college, and even before some of these guys that he had to contend with. So it's understandable production. And this is a case where Washington looked beyond the raw box scores and looked at a class that may arguably be one of the most athletic classes that we've ever seen in terms of wide receivers. I mean, top to bottom, there are some crazy good athletes. Kelvin Harmon, oh, God. Total opposite end of the spectrum. But Terry McLaurin, stud athlete, as you touched on. 95th percentile, 6 foot, 208. I mean, borderline feature size there at wide receiver. But this is a player that I think that Haskins, again, has that rapport with. And that's a great point. That may be something that starts to play a factor early. And I'm a fan at his price tag because I think McLaurin, just like the NFL draft, is kind of just being dismissed a little bit. I mean, this is one of the earlier receivers off the board in this class. And in rookie drafts, I don't think he's getting much love either. So that's an interesting name, and somebody that if you're, late second round, mid second round, I might be taking him over, the likes of some of these other guys. I'm definitely taking him over Alexander Madison. All right, so
couldn't go an episode without getting a little jab in.
There's no way. What about? Okay, man, this is now I'm happy to see this name on here.
Yeah.
Justice Hill to Baltimore in the 4th round. I usually kill draft capital. 4th round is just that's starting to get off the board for me in terms of like historical hit rate. But Justice Hill, man, sneaky good athleticism, and did he go to a good landing spot?
Yeah, man, this is a player that JJ touched on last week, so I was stoked when all three of us were in lockstep as far as that goes. A player that you and I both talked about in shows prior and pre-draft, and as you said, we like this wide receiver class. I know you kind of let in with, there was people that, the league wasn't too hot on it, but we did have a bunch of good athletes at the wide receiver position. We could not say the same thing as far as running backs, but there were a few gems that stood out as far as athleticism, and Justice Hill definitely was one of them. 4.440, 130-inch broad, 40-inch vertical. So checks the box in a super underwhelming is not even the word for this running back class, but Justice Hill obviously stands out above most of these names. So that's a big win for him, especially in this year. 5'10", 198, so didn't quite touch that 200-pound threshold, which we normally like to see, especially again for a back, the way he moves, the way he plays. So probably lower on some folks' list, given the build, given the question marks as far as carrying the load, wherever the case may be. Player profile has a Reggie Bush comparison. Which
mommy!
I think you and I talked about that again pre-draft. When we saw that, we both kind of our chairs, we kind of spun around in our chairs a little bit. So we got the Reggie Bush comparisons. We got our guy JJ buying them. Landing spot is the most interesting, and I'm excited to get your thoughts here as well. But so 4th round draft capital, again, not exactly what you like to see, but in Baltimore, a team that likes to move the ball through the ground. We just talked about Lamar Jackson and his question marks, as a passer and what he likes to do on the ground. So it's probably a safe bet to figure that this offense is going to continue to run through the ground, even as they kind of try to work out the kinks and kind of build something through the air. So as far as kind of contenders and what Justice Hill has to kind of work against, Mark Ingram turns 30 in December, so he hits that dreaded 30-year-old wall. Gus Edwards is a kid that we saw given opportunity last year, and he might be more so he's just a guy at this point. Doesn't do much as far as pass catching. A good depth player, perhaps.
How dare you? How dare you? All those people that bought him.
Dude, there was people buying him, lining up to buy him. So Gus Edwards to me probably more so just a guy. There's Ken Dixon, who has been just a consistent what if throughout his entire professional career here. I know he's got a pretty decent following as well, but I say all that to say that the path could, again, we talk about these paths opening up. This path for Justice Hill was one of the more easier ones to kind of map out. Mark Ingram, even if he kind of stays ahead and stays the leader for this year, 30 years old, things could quickly change next year, and it could all of a sudden, maybe Lamar Jackson doesn't make that notable leap as a passer, and the offense continues to kind of chug through the ground, these quick little dump offs. Justice Hill does have hands. He was getting it done on the ground. He could be a factor out of the backfield as far as a receiver as well. So one of the more intriguing options, especially given kind of where he's being drafted, and I think after the JJ bump, I think other guys like Reeves and a bunch of other kind of big name analysts are also buying. So wouldn't be surprised if wherever he was getting drafted probably isn't. That's not going to be the case anymore. But as far as redraft, including your redraft leagues here, man, there is a ton to like, and Justice Hill could be one of the bigger surprises kind of out of the gate, and one of the bigger winners kind of overall. So a player that again, you and I have definitely been singing his praises, and I think for pretty good reason as well.
Man, you put all the Gus the Bus owners. You gave everybody diarrhea. All those guys that chipped in a first because they were trying to contend, they're like, I need that Baltimore back. And then Baltimore goes and signs, Mark Ingram. Now here's the thing. Matt Kelly and I talked about this on a couple different episodes. We were talking about Justice Hill, and he made a trade and gave up Justice Hill. But he had been browbeating the hell out of Mark Ingram, saying that Mark Ingram is only a product of New Orleans. He was only good because he played in New Orleans. Now, whether that's true or not, if you believe that, then you got to be buying Justice Hill, right? Because there is nobody else. I mean, unless you think that Gus Edwards is the guy, Justice Hill brings a special type of juice to this offense that does not exist on it elsewhere. I understand that Justice Hill is not feature size. He's right about 200 pounds. He's 5'10". But there's been players that have been successful at this size previously. And if you go back to 2017 at Oklahoma State, it was an awakening. This is a guy that carried the rock 268 times. Got into the end zone 15 times. Had 31 receptions that year. So we know he's a pass catcher. We've seen this out of him. So he goes to Baltimore, a team that ranks number 9 in run blocking and number 8 in pass protection. And don't forget, It's a big advantage to be running behind an offensive line this good with a mobile quarterback. It opens things up. And different from a Russell Wilson type, Lamar Jackson is an absolute threat all the time to break off a big play. So teams are going to play Russell Wilson one way. They're going to play Lamar Jackson a totally different way. And that could play a big factor for a guy like Justice Hill that gets on the field and adds a level of dynamic ability that even a healthy Mark Ingram just does not add to this offense. He may not be a stable pass protector because he's not going to offer that 225-pound, rock size to help, stop some of these linebackers or free rushers. But I'm a fan of Justice Hill, and there's not a lot in front of him. So that's somebody that you've definitely got to be putting tabs on. And I thought he was the number 5 running back in this class to me. I realize you're a fan of Damien Harris. Things might have changed a little bit here. Damien Harris, a little more draft capital, went to a place with maybe a little more opportunity, got the future size, but Justice Hill, rightfully so, could be right in there with the Mark Ingram injury. We could see Justice Hill getting some run pretty early. The question is he the type of back that can play every down? I think he is, but I don't know if he's got the stamina and the ability to kind of live up to the beating that he might take doing so. Okay, so this is different. They're only off by 1 spot, but you're not going to typically see this. Only on the Breakout Finder podcast with Ryan Lopes at the helm. You're only going to see this here. TJ Hockenson. We have not said Noah Fant's name yet. We have not said it. To Detroit, first round, 8th pick, one of the highest selected tight ends we've seen in a very long time. What are we doing with TJ Hockenson?
Yeah, another Matt Kelly favorite. Again, at least he was pre-draft. We had Mr. Kelly on the show, and he was throwing out the Hock. He kept saying Hock all show, Hock this, Hock that, and he loves TJ Hock, dude. So the story is well known. His last season, many said he put up the numbers and outplayed Noah Fant. Is the better blocker, either slightly or overwhelmingly so, depending on who you're talking to here. Obviously has the draft capital. The George Kittle comparisons were a bit rich. TJ Hockenson was only a 74th percentile Spark X score, which by no means is bad, but it wasn't whatever George Kittle put up, which was stellar. There is a lot to like about TJ Hockenson, whether you're a film grinder or just simply a data and numbers guy. He goes into an offense which is going to try to make right on the Eric Ebron investment a handful of years back, and maybe they get it right now with TJ. I guess my concern for him and why I have him below Noah Fant, again, film wise, he's checking boxes. He's going to get it done as a receiver after the catch. He's an awesome blocker in the mold of George Kittle in that regard. We talked about it last show with JJ. I guess his ranking and what you think about these pass catchers depends on what you think about this offense and their commitment or push to kind of run things through the ground. So there is a concern for me there that this offense truly does shift, despite me kind of maybe not buying Kerryon Johnson and this offense in general. There is reasonable, you can connect the dots and kind of get worried about this offense again, completely feeding Kerryon, getting things done through the ground. We talked about Kenny G through the air, an ascending talent. Marvin Jones turns 29 or 30, so he's getting up there in age as well. As far as pass catchers, man, there is a path here for TJ, but at the same time, Matt Stafford to me has kind of just been a bit more up and down. He turns 31 or 32, so he's getting up there as well. So I guess this ranking obviously depends on kind of how you view what this offense is going to become identity-wise. Is it going to truly be one that just funnels through the ground? Does TJ Hockenson get stuck, being utilized as that top-tier blocker to kind of get things done through the ground, help Kerryon Johnson get going, or is he kind of that security blanket for Matt Stafford? Does he bypass some of these other guys? Danny Amendola, all these other guys. Does he automatically kind of become third in this picking order, so to speak? So I went back and forth on him and Noah Fant, but again, if you like our Matt Kelly or maybe yourself here too, bro, if you had him higher, I'm not necessarily arguing, but I think there are some reasons for concern.
If I was Matt Kelly, my face would be melting off of the bone right now and dripping into my lap. Look,
he loves him, huh?
Detroit was number 20 in run blocking last year, and this is a team that came out publicly and said, look, we want to run the ball. Again, despite the fact that passing the ball is more efficient and a better way to move it, they want to run the ball, and they want to run it with Kerryon Johnson. And TJ Hockenson being one of the best pass blocking tight ends in the class, / a great receiver and a very good athlete, it's a smart pick for them. Look, it's gonna help the run blocking. It's gonna give them a tight end that can get open down the field for Matt Stafford. They've tried this in the past, like you alluded to with Eric Ebron. They went and got Luke Wilson when his contract was up. So they've tried the athletic tight end. And a lot of these guys on this roster are old. I mean, you brought up Marvin Jones. I mean, Marvin Jones has been the sleeper call by every analyst for the last 5 years. I'm waiting for the year. Exactly. This is it. This is the year.
That's him and Devontae Parker this year, bro.
Same year. I'm not sure which one is less likely to happen. Kenny Golladay, clearly the alpha in this offense. I mean, had a breakout year last year. Expect more things going forward this year. But on the surface, this is one of the thinnest wide receiver groups in the league. I mean, we've got a young second-year receiver in Kenny Golladay. You've got Marvin Jones, who you alluded to, rarely healthy, has yet to really have that big-time breakout. Danny Amendola is a serviceable slot wide receiver who has experience. Years ago, if you were playing fantasy football, you remember that Danny Amendola was supposed to be the Wes Welker. When he arrived there, that didn't necessarily go for him. But then you've got TJ Hockenson. And aside from these running backs and Theo Riddick, who we expect to see some targets, TJ Hockenson could be a guy that's utilized more in this offense. But I do expect him to be a blocker because it's something that they needed help with. Okay, so all right, we're not that far away to the next tight end, Noah Fant. He's just one slot higher for you. Seems negligible, seems unnecessary. Could have put somebody in between them. Noah Fant to Denver, also in the first round, about 12 picks later. Tell me the story on Noah Fant and why one slot higher? Why do you have to be so different?
Dude, so we, again, pre-draft, the TJ Hockenson and the George Kittle comparisons were everywhere. If you pull up Mr. Kelly's player profiler and you type in Noah Fant, you will see a picture of George Kittle for Noah Fant as far as his best comparable. Noah Fant had the rare 94th percentile Spark X score, man. He is a dominant athlete at the position, much like George Kittle was when George Kittle tested at the combine, man, blew the doors off the combine. And obviously, a lot of people are kind of kicking themselves as to, how can we missed it with George Kittle? It was all there for him, man. So Noah Fant drops the ridiculous Spark X score, 82nd percentile college dominator rating, 74th percentile yards per reception, 85th percentile breakout age. This Noah Fant checked every single box that you want to have checked. Couldn't quite say the same for TJ Hockenson, so that's kind of why I lean Noah Fant. But man, I could wake up on Wednesday or Thursday and I might flip around. I think they're close enough where you can kind of go back and forth. Noah Fant, 6'4", 249. Again, touched on the freaky athleticism. Got it done production-wise. 494 yards back in 2017, just over 500 yards in 2018. 11 scores in 2017, just ridiculous efficiency. Another 7 scores his junior campaign last year, 2018. So again, athleticism, production, draft capital, it's all there for Noah Fant. You look at the Denver Broncos roster. We talked about the quarterback situation. Joe Flacco stinks. They drafted Drew Lock, despite Joe Flacco's historical stinkiness, man. He does like the tight end. He does target the tight end. So that bodes well for someone like Noah Fant. But at the same time, that stinkiness could lead to a mid-season replacement or something like that too. So you could get a quarterback chair that looks differently around week 6, 7, or 8 or something like that. Which again, you have to factor all that into your dynasty evaluation here as well. Cortland Sutton, on the rise. Deshaun Hamilton, I love Deshaun Hamilton, man. I'm buying Deshaun. Still got Emmanuel Sanders who's coming off that injury there, so maybe his outlook is a bit more, muddier than some of these other pass catchers. Talked about Phillip Lindsay last show. We know we're all buying Royce Freeman out of the backfield as well, so they have an interesting duo out of there as well, which could obviously siphon some of this volume away. So the stars are somewhat aligning for Noah Fant. He, again, checks all the boxes as far as draft capital, athleticism, all that good stuff. Falls into a pretty good spot as well, and even a better spot if Joe Flacco can kind of hold things together and finish out a season. And again, we know about Flacco's, ability to kind of target and kind of funnel these targets to the tight end position. So overall, Noah Fant to me feels like a pretty safe bet, which is why I have him where he is.
I think Noah Fant's floor should be reasonably good. I mean, look, Demaryius Thomas gone. That was 56 targets there. This is a team that targeted the running back position, well over 100 times last year between Freeman, Lindsay, and Booker. Yeah, Emmanuel Sanders coming off of a pretty significant injury. We don't really know what he's going to be. There's 100 targets there. So this is a team that decided they need to get more dynamic. They need to go get a young playmaker. And with Joe Flacco, we both agree Joe Flacco is just
stinky,
terrible.
Bro.
Yeah, stinky. I mean, that's a nice way of putting it. But when you go back and look at Flacco, a 31-year-old Dennis Pitta back in 2016 had 121 targets. I mean, that was with a rookie Brashad Perryman who went in the first round, who was expected to be the guy. That was with a 30-year-old Mike Wallace. That was with a 37-year-old Steve Smith who was still cutting people up at the time. That's when Kamar Aiken was a name. That's when Kyle Juszczyk was a name. Man, all these guys. That's when Justin Forsett was kind of a name. So there was a lot of mouths to feed, but despite that, he was still targeting the tight end. Now, Dennis Pitta was a seasoned tight end, and we talk about the tight end position taking some time to sort of culminate and learn the role, but we also agree that depending on who you talk to, Noah Fant may or may not be a great blocker, but we know he's a good offensive weapon with elite athleticism. So maybe his blocking game isn't what gets used initially. Maybe we find him out in the passing game a little more often running routes because that is what he's good at, and he does bring a level of athleticism that defenses are going to struggle to cover. I mean, he will be very tough to keep up with in the open field. And on a team that we assume Courtland Sutton is rising, we assume Deshaun Hamilton is rising. Again, no locked-in elite player in this offense. There's a lot of hopes of ascension with some of these players, but there's no guaranteed stud. I mean, we believe Phillip Lindsay is good, but also a lot of us believe that Phillip Lindsay may be a player that could be looking for some regression going forward and potentially injuries because that frame is not historically one that carries a long history of success. Again, unless, like JJ said, you're Jamal Charles, which is a generational thing. And I'm not sure that Phillip Lindsay is. Point is, you've got Drew Lock kind of waiting in the background. We may see him sooner than later if Joe Flacco is not getting it done, like he has not been getting it done for a very, very, very long time.
Stinky.
But this felt like a bridge, right? Like they're doing this, give Drew Lock a little bit of time, sign Joe Flacco because they want a veteran out there. But I'm a fan of Noah Fant, and I think most people should be. If you play in a tight end premium league, obviously you're reaching a little further for him. But in your typical formats, I think he's the type of guy that's going off, late first round. I'm trying to get my hands on most of these running backs. There's a couple receivers I like a lot more just because of upside and opportunity. But fairly ranked, man, Noah Fant. So the last name on this list at number 13, the best bot in the draft, as someone once said, almost falls into the third round, but Pete Carroll, he saved him, man. DK Metcalf on the phone crying to Pete Carroll. He said, "Why'd you wait so long, man? Why did they wait so long?"
Dude, you said a lot about Noah Fant, man. I was kind of hoping you would dial it back, knowing that we queued up your guy here. I'm gonna say a few words, man. I'm gonna pass the mic to you, man. I would love to get you. I want you just to pour your heart and soul out and tell us all about DK Metcalf, man. But high level here, we know the story about DK Metcalf. We know about the agility score or lack thereof. You and I talked about it pre-draft and never really came up pre-combine. But then when people kind of had those numbers to kind of go off of, all of a sudden it was there was a lot of concerns about it. 99th percentile SparkX score, best spot in the draft, man, by far. Dude is an alien, an absolute alien. Draws an Andre Johnson comparison over at Player Profiler, 6'3", 228. The last thing I'll say before I kind of turn it over to you, you kind of get down to the nitty gritty here for us. One of the more interesting kind of post-combine comparisons that I saw for DK Metcalf that I wasn't thinking about prior, but I'm over here at Mock Draftable. They do the athletic testing webs and stuff like that. So I've been looking at whenever I hear or see DK Metcalf, I can't help but think, I'm seeing the Martavis Bryant web and I'm seeing the DK Metcalf web. If DK Metcalf turns out to be, again, they both had the deficiencies as far as the agility scores and the three-cone testing. But if DK Metcalf turns out to be, again, putting all the off-field nonsense aside about Martavis Bryant, so assuming DK Metcalf can hit that, he essentially is in the mold. He can be a bigger, stronger, faster Martavis Bryant. To me, that sounds like a pretty good wide receiver. I mean, we saw Martavis Bryant's highs and his flashes, no pun intended. There was there was a lot to like about Martavis Bryant. Obviously couldn't hold it together off the field and kind of got himself in some trouble. But when he was on the field and when he was playing at a high level, there's not much that defensive backs can do against that type of athlete, that type of speed, size combination. And that's what DK Metcalf is, man. He is that rare size speed, Al Davis type of, Al Davis is alive, man. He is running to the podium at the Raiders' 4th pick or whatever it was to draft DK Metcalf. But again, special athlete. There are some questions about some certain questions about his athletic profile, his production coming off the neck injury at school and stuff like that. So there are reasons that probably led to him slipping. But man, best spot in the draft, bro. Your Seattle Seahawks. Talk to me.
Oh my man. Russell Wilson has come out recently and said that DK Metcalf can do everything and that he thinks he looks really, really special and he looks like a tremendous athlete. Now, I don't know if that's Russell Wilson trying to pump him up and give him confidence, because as you're well aware, DK Metcalf videos of him doing drills without pads hit the internet, and everybody that's a scout in the world, if you got 20 followers and you got an opinion and a keyboard, you're a scout.
Bro, he was high stepping out of his break off the line. He was high knees.
He was getting killed. We don't know that that's not a Pete Carroll trolling thing. Like, hey DK, we're about to record this. Just look like a robot for a minute.
Yeah, look like
and he's like, no problem.
You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, but to your point, here's the thing. DK Metcalf at 230 pounds basically ran a 4.33. I mean, if you're a defensive back and you're trying to cover this guy, if he learns anything about the nuance of the position, you're absolutely toast. Dude's got one of the biggest verts that we've seen. I think he had over a 40-inch vert. So he's already 6'3". He jumps 40 inches. He runs a 4.33. What cornerback is going to stop this dude if he puts the game together? And remember, I don't know if the fear with DK Metcalf is more that people think he's not polished, or they're concerned that he went to Seattle because they feel like Russell Wilson doesn't get enough passing opportunity. But I stand by the fact that Russell Wilson was borderline a career low in pass attempts in 2018. The Seattle Seahawks decided they wanted to run the ball, and they ran the ball a shitload, more than anybody expected. And shockingly enough, the Seattle Seahawks offensive line was pretty good. I mean, this is an O-line that's been awful for years. Football Outsiders had him number 12 last year, and they look like it. I mean, you look at the players on this team. You saw Chris Carson. You saw Rashad Penny effective in the run game. Just shocking to see for a team that we felt like needed a Marshawn Lynch, somebody that could create on his own, break tackles, do it on the second level. But then you look at the group of receivers. Doug Baldwin is no longer with Seattle, a player that's going to retire. His career is likely over. But even Doug Baldwin, who led the team in targets, only had 73 last year. Man, that is non-existent target share. So they go and add DK Metcalf as the early wide receiver selection, end of the second round. They go add Gary Jennings, a guy that I think you're a fan of as well. He can play that slot role. The expectation is that Tyler Lockett, their most experienced outside receiver, who Pro Football Focus has shown numerous times, has a crazy high statistical, a hookup with Russell Wilson when he's targeted. I think it's like 108 is his score there. I mean, it's one of the highest in the league. And Russell Wilson is one of the most accurate, best quarterbacks in the whole league. I brought this up before. He had 427 pass attempts, 35 touchdowns last year. I mean, it's unbelievable. And people say that his touchdown rate is unsustainable because last year it was 8.2. But he's been over 6 almost more times than Peyton Manning was in his whole career. And I pointed this out a few months ago. So the touchdown rate to me is not unsustainable. Russell Wilson just has a knack for finding guys in the end zone. No more Jimmy Graham. No more big wide receiver. They tried with the Sidney Rices. They tried with, we've got David Moore here. There's been some guys that have come up as undrafted guys that they've tried. They brought in Jimmy Graham. This is the first big wide receiver that Russell Wilson has ever had, and the sky is truly the limit. And I feel like Russell Wilson is going to get closer to 500 pass attempts this year than 400, which is what we saw last year. And I would be buying DK Metcalf in this offense because really, Tyler Lockett, who has been healthy, one injury to Tyler Lockett, who's the wide receiver one in this offense? I mean, it's locked and loaded DK Metcalf, and it may be just one of those things where him and Russell are just playing, throw and catch, and he's just going up and making plays, and that's just the way it's got to be. They're going to lean on the run, but don't sleep on the fact that this guy went to arguably the best quarterback in the league's, offense, despite the fact that they don't throw it that much. So I'm a big fan of DK. I'm a big fan of his upside. I'm not ignoring his college production. We know he played with A.J. Brown. He played with DeMarcus Lodge. He played with a lot of talented players in this offense, and he had injuries. I mean, you brought it up earlier. There's a significant injury there. Is it going to play a factor in the future? Possibly. I mean, these injuries don't go away. We see them linger amongst a lot of talented players in the league. So the hope is that DK Metcalf can get right. But the biggest knock on him after the draft is his 3-cone. And if that's all you got, I mean, really, like it was production and then he tested and suddenly it was 3-cone. I mean, what else could we nitpick, right? I mean, we talk about Paris Campbell going to a great spot, but Paris Campbell is behind Funchess. He's behind T.Y. Hilton. He's behind Marlon Mack, who's heavy in the run game, Nyheim Hines, who's heavy in the game. DK Metcalf goes to the Seattle Seahawks as one of the most athletic wide receivers that we have seen in a long time, and the only thing that stands in front of him is Tyler Lockett. That's it. And I love Tyler Lockett, but there's nobody there. There's nothing. So as a Seahawks homer, clearly, somebody's hitting the wrap it up box right now. As a Seahawks homer, man, I like DK Metcalf. I was glad they selected him, and I feel like the sky's the limit with a quarterback like Russell Wilson and an offense like the Seattle Seahawks.
Do you think the 13th overall ranking just missing the first round as far as dynasty rookie drafts go? Do you think that's fair? I mean, you said it yourself, you're obviously a Seahawks fan, but putting that aside or trying to compartmentalize this, do you think that's a fair ranking? Do you think he's a surefire, no questions asked first rounder, or do you think you have him more at this top of the tier 2 kind of a spot?
I think unless you play in a super flex league where you would have 2 quarterbacks, I think Kyler Murray may go at the end of the first round. I think Kyler Murray likely slips a little bit because most teams in a 12-team league have a quarterback. I realize JJ came on and boosted the ADP of Kyler Murray by saying he can be a top 5 quarterback. So with that being said, likely he does go in the first round. I know for me personally, I wouldn't be selecting him, so I feel like that might push DK into this first tier, but I also feel like DK is kind of in that group with a little bit of a question mark. I like him more than Terry McLaurin. I don't necessarily like him more than Marquise Brown. I like his size more, but that's where you start to kind of question these guys. Marquise Brown, who had the draft capital, but goes to Baltimore, doesn't have the future size, goes to a quarterback that's a little inaccurate versus DK Metcalf, who might not have the college production, but has the athleticism, has the size, went to a better situation. I think that's where you've got to start kind of questioning these things. But I think that's pretty fair, man. I think he's right there at the turn. I think he's at the end of the first, or, for some guys, he's kind of the middle middle of the first. I think some guys are taking him higher than Mecole Hardman, not above A.J. Brown, not above Isabella. Some guys are taking him before Marquise Brown for the reasons I just laid out, because Baltimore was a tough place to go for a wide receiver that is a burner with Lamar Jackson. We hope Lamar can hook up with him to make that value kind of sustain. But no, I'm with you. I think it's a smart place to have him. I think it's fair. And I think the only thing that might change is Kyler Murray here. And thank God I don't see Alexander Mattison anywhere in this group.
2 references, bro.
Oh man.
Get the closing credits out, bro, and get us the hell out of here.
Let's wrap this thing up, man. It's way too late. It's like 11 o'clock where Ryan is. It's 8 o'clock where I am. I'm hot as hell right now. Listen, that's the end of the show here. Man, once again, appreciate everybody listening. We had an insane amount of plays last week. I feel like we're only going to continue going forward here. Hit Ryan up on Twitter. Give him a follow. Ryan's one of the smartest dudes out there. Still Ryan5 on Twitter. He's constantly grinding. If you are an Oakland Raiders self-deprecating fan, go hit up Ryan, man. Go join him.
It's fun over here.
Go join him on the dark side.
I absolutely hate Sundays.
Hit him up. Go follow the Breakout Finder Twitter account. If you're not, we're constantly posting links to the videos, podcasts, little nuggets from inside the database. Graphics are coming out all the time. We're just cooking them up all day long over here. So you can follow that at Breakout_Finder to address the website. It's coming, man. I know that I feel like we've been saying this forever, and I feel like I've been saying it forever.
Yeah, dude, I'm gonna be upset when it's actually here, and we can't say that anymore.
I know.
We gotta promise something else. Like once that drops, we have to promise something else for like a year and a half.
Well, we're gonna promise that you're gonna get line-in Wi-Fi, line-in internet connection. That'll drag out for another 4 to 5 months, likely. This guy. So, anyways, I appreciate everybody coming on here. Ryan, once again, I felt like this was a fantastic videocast / podcast. Check it out, subscribe, hit us up, and share with your friends. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next week.